Hello everyone, welcome to Marketing Analytics. In this video, I will give an introduction of the course and Excel basics video to follow. Over the past decade, the business world has experienced an analytics revolution. From sports to marketing to self-driving cars, a lot of things have changed when people start to realize the power of using data for analytics. Here are 3 stories in the analytics revolution. A story about profit margins, a story about step-back shooting in basketball, and a story about how companies grow. On the screen, you see 5 different companies: Chipotle Mexican Grill, Coca-Cola, Kroger, McDonald's, and Walmart. So on the right-hand side, you see 5 different numbers. These are the profit margins of these 5 companies. Can you connect the companies on the left to the profit margins on the right? Pause the video and spend a few seconds to connect the boxes. So here's the answer. Chipotle Mexican Grill, 10%. Coca-Cola, 25%. Kroger, 1%. And we have McDonald's and Walmart left. McDonald's profit margin is a whopping 30% and Walmart 2%. Hold on to your thoughts about some surprisingly high profit margins. Let's go back to the metric that defines profit margin. So profit margin is equal to revenue minus the total cost divided by revenue. So for example, if a company has no cost, it will be revenue minus 0, and divided by revenue, it gives a profit margin of 1, or alternatively 100%. If the company has a very high cost, which is equal to the revenue, then the numerator is 0. So 0 divided by revenue is 0. One thing to notice is that sometimes the total cost can be higher than the revenue. That is, the numerator can be negative, which would result in a negative profit margin. This happens often when the business first starts. So related to the concept of profit margin, we also have 2 other margins that are used often. In gross margin, the only difference is the total cost is not the sum of costs, but the cost of goods sold. So for Walmart, for example, gross margin would be the revenue Walmart has created minus the cost that Walmart spends to acquire the goods. The additional costs, such as hiring people, running marketing campaigns, they are not counted when we calculate the gross margin. And another margin is the operating margin. In operating margin, the cost term does not include interest or tax. So the cost incurred for acquiring the products, hiring people, paying salaries, running advertising, these costs are all counted towards operating margin, but not interest or taxes. So this is the concept of profit margin. Then back to the question that we may all have asked, why is McDonald's profit margin so high at 30%? It's a restaurant business. Chipotle Mexican Grill is a restaurant business. So 30% versus 10%, that's a very big difference. So to understand McDonald's high profit margin, you have to know the business context where McDonald's is running a franchise business. Its money spent is mostly on maintaining the brand, running advertising, instead of on operating the restaurants like Chipotle Mexican Grill would do. So with this story comes lesson 1. Metrics are more than metrics. So the simple metric of profit margin is not just about the number itself. Not all restaurants are created equal, and for the same line of business, the profit margin can be massively different. Our second story is about step-back shooting in basketball. And this action in the NBA has been perfected by the former Rockets great James Harden. Generally speaking, when playing basketball, the players would want to get as close to the basket as possible because when you get closer to the basket, the shooting percentage increases. You shoot more accurately. For step back shooting, however, the player dribbles up and then stops and then step back to shoot the basket. So the question is, why does James Harden step back instead of stepping forward in basketball? To answer this question, we have to think about the advantage of stepping back. So by stepping back, although you are further away from the basket, you are also further away from the defender. The trade-off made in stepping back is you're further away from the defender, so your shooting percentage increases. And what you give up is when you step back, you're further away from the basket, your shooting percentage decreases. The question is, which side is bigger? Here, let me give you an example. Let's say when James Harden's defender is within 3 feet, his shooting percentage drops by 5%. Let's say it goes from 60% to 55% when the defender is within 3 feet. So by stepping back to stay away from the defender, James Harden would gain 5% in shooting percentage. Also because he's further away from the basket by 3 feet, his shooting percentage would drop because he's further away from the basket. So let's say his shooting percentage drops 1% each foot he's away from the basket. So in this case, 3 feet translates to a 3% drop in shooting. So when we consider these two factors, plus 5% versus minus 3%, by stepping back, James Harden would actually increase his shooting percentage by 2%. So he actually does better when he steps back. So through some simple crack of data, the players can make a more informed decision deciding what they want to do on the court. And the second lesson I want to highlight is data is not just the data. When you consider the context that how the data is generated with a defender in the picture, you may come to a different conclusion. So the data generation process matters. Our third story is on Netflix. In particular, on the percentage growth of Netflix subscribers. So the calculation for percentage growth is equal to the subscribers this year minus the number of subscribers last year divided by the number of subscribers last year. So that gives us the percentage growth. When you look at the path of growth, this is what we see. This chart shows the growth of Netflix subscribers. The vertical axis measures the number of subscribers in thousands. So for example, the top of the vertical axis is 250,000, so that's 250 million people. And the horizontal axis is over the years. So as we can see in this chart, Netflix has incurred a skyrocketing growth from 2002 up until 2018. And if we project the growth by drawing the line out, this may be what we see, explosive growth. Alternatively, when we think about this, are there other possibilities on the projection of future Netflix subscribers? Of course. This line can go going up, slowing down, and plateau, or it can turn a nosedive. Of course, the question is which projection is most likely to happen and what may be driving the projection. Well, the answer to this question lies in the magnitude of subscribers on the left side. So on top of this, we have 250 million. And the question to think about is, what is the population in the US? And perhaps more relevant, what is the number of households in the US? because people in the same household would most likely share the same Netflix account. If you have a general idea of the population in the US, it's about 330 million. And on average, there are 3 people in a household. So 330 million divided by 3, that's 110 million households. So the first thing to notice is this projection, 250 million, it's already more than twice the upside potential of the US market. If you want to further investigate this question, we can take a look at the demographic composition in the US. Here I'm going to introduce a concept called a population pyramid. A population pyramid shows the composition of the population in a country in terms of gender. On the left are male, on the right are female, and at different age groups from the lowest 0 to 4 go all the way up to 100 plus. And the bar on the left indicates the percentage of male population in a specific age band. On the right are the percentages of female population in a specific age band. In this case, for example, people aged 55 to 59, they account for 3.2% of the population, and female 3.3% of the population. So the beauty of the population pyramid is you will instantly see the composition of male versus female and at different age groups. This is a very useful tool for business planning, especially long-range business planning, for the simple reason that people who are 55 to 59 this year would be 65 to 69 10 years later. So you can actually see the future from this. So as you can see, the shape of the population pyramid for the US is somewhat like a skyscraper, fairly even across different age groups. If we face a growing population, let's say the population pyramid for Nigeria, you're going to see a different shape where you see a big triangle where the youngest people would have the biggest percentage in population. When it comes to Netflix, if Netflix can investigate its current population composition, then it may find ideas about what kind of age group to target and what is the future growth when, let's say, the 15 to 19 age group enters 20 to 24 and they start to subscribe to Netflix. So obviously, based on the population pyramid and overall population in the US, the skyrocketing projection of Netflix is not realistic. Our third lesson is gravity. More specifically, every projection we make has to face the physical limits of how much the market can accommodate before competitors enter the market. So going back to Netflix, since we now have the hindsight of 2022, we know that the actual subscriber growth is more like the middle projection, and its growth has become stagnated at around 220 million subscribers, and the majority of them are subscribers out of the US. So to recap, in order to apply analytics in marketing, we need to be aware of 3 things. First, we need to understand the underlying business context. Metrics are more than metrics. How the business operates matters. A company-owned restaurant versus a franchise restaurant, they operate differently. Second, we need to understand the data generating process. Data is not just the data. We have to understand how we see the data. Using the example of step back shooting in basketball, we see that stepping back, although getting further away from the basket, actually gives James Harden a positive kick by staying further away from the defender as well. And third, when we apply analytics in marketing, we need to use caution. Almost all the business projections have limits. So here are the 3 principles I want you to keep in mind when we start to examine data throughout the course of this semester. The goals of this course are threefold. First, to understand data, and more specifically, understanding the data generating process, how we got the data, what's the business context. And the second goal is to be good at Excel. Given that this is a marketing analytics course, we're not tapping into the more advanced analytics topics, but instead we want to focus on common business language dealing with numbers. So rest assured, throughout this course, you should become very good at Excel. And the third is to be able to tackle marketing issues analytically. By that, I mean you have learned marketing, you have talked about targeting, positioning, segmenting, 4Ps, etc. In this course, we're going to learn how to analyze these topics using numbers. So these are the 3 goals. Here's a roadmap for the course. There are 3 modules. In the first module, we're going to look at basic data issues, how to acquire data, and how do we analyze the return on investment for online advertising. The second module is customer analytics. We deal with 3 specific topics. How do we summarize the profiles of customers? How to estimate the customer lifetime value? How do we improve our targeting of customers by using analytics tools? The third module, we talk about 4Ps analytics. So for each one of the 4Ps, promotion, place, pricing, and product, we're going to learn an analytic tool for that specific topic. So that's a quick summary for the course. Thank you, and keep up the good work.